Chapter 4. "Lizard!" shouted Jennifer. She used her key and everything slowed to a crawl. She rushed toward Lizard as he began falling. She managed to drag him back to Victor before coming back to normal speed. "She robbed us of a sacrifice!" shouted one of the cloaked men. "She won't do it again," said the first. "Who's going to stop me?" shouted Jennifer as she stood and her eyes began glowing. One of the women screamed suddenly and slumped to the floor. The demon worshipper that had killed her rushed to another hostage before anyone could react. "The possibility that you might be too late to save the next one," said the demon worshipper. The words "too late" seemed to pierce Jennifer like daggers. She cowered back in fear that she would in fact be the cause of another hostage being executed. "They know what will happen," whispered Lucas. He had noticed Kirana's eyes glowing and knew that she wanted to strike out at their enemies. Kirana's eyes returned to their normal color and a scowl appeared on her face. "Jonathan, Stephanie needs an interpreter." Jonathan turned towards Stephanie and saw that her eyes were glowing. He grabbed his key and his eyes began glowing. The room quickly gained a blue tint as they entered the mind realm. "I need to talk to the others without the demon worshippers knowing what we're saying," said Stephanie. "Except for Victor. He needs to help Lizard with his injury." "Got it," said Jonathan. Slowly the others began to appear in the mind realm. "Can you make it so they can hear me?" asked Stephanie. "I don't think so," said Jonathan, "but I can relay your messages." "Okay, so the key to the strategy is to make them think they are killing the hostages," said Stephanie. "The first 3 intend to slit the throats of their victims. The back 4 intend to stab their hostages in the backs. The 8th hostage has 2 demon worshippers surrounding her, and they will try to do both." "How do we make them think that they are killing the hostages?" asked Jonathan. "That's going to be a combination of you and Sig," said Stephanie. "Sig needs to put shields up to prevent the knives from harming the hostages. And keep in mind, this can only work once, so make sure he knows to get the shields in the right places." Jonathan took a moment to speak to Sig. He seemed to understand. Jonathan turned back to Stephanie. "What's my part?" he asked. "You need to convince them that they have killed their hostages and they need to escape," said Stephanie. "But won't that conflict with what they see?" asked Jonathan. "They won't be able to see anything because Lucas's assignment is to set off a smoke grenade," said Stephanie. "That will be the signal to start the shields." Jonathan took a moment and relayed the strategy to Sig and Lucas. "Jennifer and I will get the hostages while the smoke is up, but you need to convince them that their escape is blocked, Jonathan," said Stephanie. "Then, as soon as we have the hostages, Kirana can clean up." Jonathan smiled. The plan was simple and elegant. It was the ideal counter for subordinates of Sarah Hawkins that had limited vision of the future. After a few moments, the blue tint of the mind realm faded away. The entire exchange had been communicated in a few seconds, and the demon worshippers had not yet started making their demands. Of course, it was only a moment later that the apparent leader of the demonic sight acolytes began speaking. "Now that we have your attention," he said, "you will remove your keys and place them on the ground slowly." Sig looked carefully at the positions of the hostages and turned to Lucas. "It's okay, Lucas," he said. The demon worshipper smiled. "That's right, it's okay," he chided. Suddenly his expression changed as he turned to Lucas as though he could see what he was going to do. "You're going to miss," he laughed. A handful of smoke grenades hit the ceiling and bounced all around the demon worshippers. "We're blind," shouted one of them. "Kill the hostages," shouted the leader. The maids shrieked in horror. To the surprise of the acolytes, their weapons seemed to bounce off of the hostages. Had they been able to see through the smoke, they would have seen perfectly placed golden shields protecting the screaming women. "We've got to get out of here," shouted one of them as they felt the hostages disappearing from their grasp. As they turned to run from the divine key bearers, an explosion blasted them back and rubble filled the hallway, blocking their escape. "Not good," shouted their leader. As the smoke cleared, a figure with a huge fiery sword and a long white cape appeared. "Flattery will get you nowhere," said Kirana angrily. The acolytes shrieked in terror as the heavenly sword exploded with heat and light. Though they knew where Kirana was going to strike, they also knew they could not dodge or block her tremendously powerful attack. In an instant, they were cut down. Kirana's sword dimmed as she turned back to ensure that her companions were all safe. Jonathan gave her a wide smile. Lizard and Victor had looks of relief on their faces. Stephanie and Lucas looked at one another as though they were still ensuring everything was okay. Sig laughed loudly at Chloe's look of shock. The women that they had rescued were also all in shock. Jennifer was trying to keep them calm, but several of them began sobbing and shaking. "Are there blankets you could lend them?" Victor asked Chloe. "Of course," she said as she rushed to another room. Stephanie followed after her. Soon they returned with armfuls of blankets. The maids seemed to calm down as they wrapped in the blankets and sat down. Chloe normally would have had a problem with blood-spattered people sitting on her plush furniture, and the maids all seemed concerned about sitting on the chairs. Chloe insisted that they not concern themselves with such trivial things after what they had endured, and they seemed to relax a bit. After several minutes, everyone seemed to have calmed down. Of course, the blood-curdling shriek that echoed through the home put the maids back on edge. They rushed to find cover, fearing some creature had come to capitalize on their moment of vulnerability. Even Chloe seemed horrified by the terrible noise. "In here, row 82, said Sig. The terrified women gave Sig looks of shock that he would invite whatever had made the sound in, but he did not notice. "It will be okay," promised Jennifer. "His bark is worse than his bite." "But you're saying there is a bite?" asked one of the maids. "There was," said Lucas. "He's tame." Row 82 stepped into the room. The women gawked at the dark implants in his neck and the plate attachments behind his ears. "You're an augment," whispered Chloe with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. "True," said Row 82 indifferently. "Where have you been?" asked Sig cheerfully. "I've been finding out about Sarah Hawkins," said Row 82. "I was going to tell you that she knows we're here, but it looks like you know about that already." "The demon worshippers were asking whether we had seen a key-bearer die," volunteered a frightened maid. "Yes," said Row 82 in a matter-of-fact tone. "That is consistent with her desire to sacrifice divine key-bearers." The others looked at each other nervously. "That actually makes a lot of sense," said Lucas. Chloe looked at him disapprovingly. "Is that appropriate?" asked Chloe. "Of course it is," said Row 82. "It's kill or be killed. It's survival of the fittest." "Now that's inappropriate," said Victor with a frown. Stephanie motioned for Jonathan to come to her. She signed, indicating she wanted a translator, and Jonathan nodded. He held his key tightly and turned to the others and spoke on her behalf. "Haven't any of you thought it was strange that Felix held on to Lizard so long when his only intention was to sacrifice him?" asked Jonathan. "Or why the fire demon worshippers were so interested in getting the key of origins from Sig? Or why they attacked Kirana's home so far south to begin with?" "You think they manipulated us into jumping back?" asked Lucas. "I don't believe they are united," said Jonathan. "They are conspiring against each other. Sarah must have known that all the other members of Archdemon's Hand would get caught by Zeta 28 and William Fine. They knew we were coming, but only she seemed to know what would happen when Zeta 28 came." "What's her plan, then?" asked Sig. "She ran away." "Perhaps only to hide her plans from the Archdemon," replied Jonathan. "Speaking for myself, though, William Fine seemed to know something about Michael's plans and why he looked like Victor." "We don't even know what Michael's plans are. How could he?" said Kirana with a frown. "We know that Molly Patterson found something out," said Jennifer, "and whatever it was, drove her to take her own life." No one seemed to know what to say in response to her. There was a sense of dread that came over everyone, the paralyzing dilemma between needing to know more before creating a strategy and being afraid of what might be learned left all of them unsure of themselves. Of course, the indecision only served to strengthen the demon lords, who were watching them and preparing to attack as they scrambled to figure out what to do.